Hello, everybody. Hope you're doing good. Time for our Saturday briefing. This is the briefing for January the 16th, our third week of the year now, and we're off and running. Hearing a lot of good reports, and I talked to many of you, and God bless you. Amazing NCR ministerial team. You're the best. I salute you, love you. Count it a privilege to work for you and work with you as we run to win. Amen. And of course, to all of our friends and extended family, church family around the country and around the world, God bless you. Thank you for your love, your care, your prayers, your support. We're just blessed. I'm so surrounded by so many people, affirming, hardworking, courageous, amazing people, and it's just a privilege. I'm glad. I know there's a lot of challenges right now, but I'm glad to be alive and about the Father's business for such a time as this. And so I want to talk to us today. I want to kind of piggyback on last week's lesson. And I thought about naming today's lesson, giving it the title of More Desire. But I decided to go a little different tack, and you'll understand as I get into it. So today I want to entitle today's lesson, Vote for Desire. So let me start this way. I want to start with an illustration that I got out of a book by Leonard Sweet. It's called Dancing the Salsa. Fun little book. It's been out for a while, but I really enjoyed it, and I've got a number of quotes and illustrations out of that book in my quote file. And I thought about this one. It kind of illustrates, or will kind of jumpstart what I want to talk to us about today. So I'm going to kind of read it to you. Sweet says, one of the local characters on Orcas Island, where I live, is Applegate. And I looked up Orcas Island. It is off the coast of Washington, the state of Washington. But anyway, he said, one of the local characters on Orcas Island, where I live, is Applegate. His friends call him App. For App, life holds nothing more precious than sailing. His passion is unending as he builds by hand his 8-foot dreamboat out of native Northwest timber. Locals trek up the mountain to cheer on this newest Noah as he builds his ark under a mountaintop's cover of cedars and Douglas firs. For 10 years now, App has been hammering and sawing hour by hour, day after day, week upon week. The construction has been running a few years slower than he figures, App admits, but he's confident the yacht will be finished in the next few years. Now here the story takes a turn. Sweet goes on to say, App is in his 80s, okay? Remember, App is confident that the yacht will be finished in the next few years, this 80-year-old Noah. Or in his 80s-year-old Noah. He didn't say how old. He's just in his 80s, so he's older than 80. And so Leonard Sweet goes on to say, I look at App with Janus-faced irony. If you know your Greek and Roman mythology, that was the god that had two faces. And so on one hand, he's my hero, someone not afraid to commit to a project that takes him into his 80s and even his 90s. But in my about face, he's my anti-hero, someone whose passion for a life experience has lifted that very experience out of his life. For you see, App has been so busy building his yacht that he's not been sailing in years. I thought about that as I was preparing this lesson. And if we're not careful, our desires, sometimes we're afraid of them, and we'll say they'll get away from us, and we'll get out of control if we pander to our desires. But I want to look at it another way. If we're not careful, we can get so busy doing life that our desires never come to fruition. They can get away from us. And so let me remind you of last week's thesis. It's the same for today. Desire births passion, and passion is the fuel that drives progress. Succeeding in anything in life requires a lot of hard work. If you see somebody, that they're at the top of their game and everybody's applauding them and they're the best since sliced bread, I promise you there were a lot of lonely early morning hours and late nights and grunt work during the day. When others were relaxing, they were pressing on. That takes passion. And so without desire, our lives become passionless and directionless and eventually meaningless. So desire is critical because it fuels passion, and passion fuels progress, focus, movement. However, this is where we pick up today. It is important that we are very clear on our desires. For if we are not, it is easy to procrastinate and postpone the necessary effort and sacrifices that will be required to obtain our deepest desire. And what we do, if we're not careful, like app, we can replace our deepest desires with lesser things, busy work, endless activities that give us a temporary spiritual, emotional, and physical sugar high, but bring us no real nourishment, no real strength toward fulfilling the deepest desires of our heart. Just this week, I've been, just about everybody that I've been talking to, especially my ministers, and so some of you know where I'm going with this, but I've been asking you, what do you desire for this year? And what do you desire at your deepest level? And I had one of my pastors, he was talking, and he says, it dawned on me that my son, I've only got about 2 more years with him. He's a junior in high school. Next year he'll graduate, he'll go off to college, and bam, he'll be gone. And I have recalibrated my life. There's things that I like to do, but he is not as interested in those things, but there's things that he likes to do. And I am changing my priorities, my schedule, and everything so that I can spend as much time with him in these next 2 years, because I know once he's gone, he'll get on with his life and our time together will be very limited. That's a father, just in the nick of time, realize, wait a minute, I can while away my life being busy, doing good things, but I'm going to let my deepest desires, one of them, get away from me if I don't change. And so desire is hugely important. Now, this gets me to the crux of my lesson as far as why I entitled it Vote for Desire. One of the books I recommended earlier this year on my recommended reading list for personal growth, one of those was a book by James Clear called Atomic Habits. Outstanding book, and I highly recommend it. But Clear says this in Atomic Habits: every action we take is a vote on the kind of person we're going to be. Well, I believe in every area of our life, if we think about it, everything you do is a vote on the kind of person you're going to be. For instance, the way you spend your time is a vote on the kind of person you're going to be. Talked to another pastor this week, and God bless him. We talked about this last year, but he at the risk of sacrifice, they tightened their belt as a family. Said, I've had this full-time job, and as important as it is, but our ministry, our desires, our hopes, our dreams, the things that we can see happening, we can't get it all done. And so at the risk of cutting pay and cutting back, he voted to make progress in his ministry by cutting back on his job. And now his church is growing. They haven't missed a beat. And God has blessed and met the needs. But it all started when his desire to be able to fulfill his ministry trumped a temporary solution. And he made the necessary sacrifices to move forward. He voted with his time on the kind of person and the minister he was going to be. The way you spend your money is a vote for your desires or your lack of desire, for the kind of person you're going to be. I was thrilled this week in talking to one of my ministers, and I don't want to get too personal here, but I was thrilled. I've been talking to him for some time, and one of his desires, he knew that he wasn't saving for retirement. And so if you'll remember, you can go back and check it. I talked to us about the Church of God's 403B plan, their retirement plan, and encouraged you to become a saver, to vote with your dollars to have a better future. Well, long story short, he started this year out. He's filled out the application. He's going to start sending in a certain amount of money. And I remember telling him, the best time for you to have done this was like 50 years ago or 40 years ago, whenever it was you were first starting. Even if you could have just put $5 a month, it'd have been better. That was the best time to do it. But the second best time is right now. And so right now he's voting with his money that says, I am going to say no to the sugar fixes, the temporary things right now. I'm going to say no to them so that I am voting for a better future for tomorrow. And the good news is his church is going to join with him and put some in it too. But it would have never happened if he hadn't have identified his desire, and that fueled passion to make changes. I talked to another pastor. And years ago, this is a pastor out of the region, but a well-known pastor and a very successful man. But he said years ago, we made a decision that we were not going to have debt and we were going to drive old junker cars while our children were at home, because we wanted to be able to travel and make memories. They've traveled all over the North Central region over the years, camping out and seeing all of our great sites. But he voted with his money. The way you spend your time, the way you spend your money, you are voting for the kind of person you're going to be, the kind of life you're going to have, the kind of influence you're going to have. Let me give you one more. The way you eat, the way you exercise is a vote for the kind of person you're going to be, the kind of future you're going to have. I remember years ago, it's a long story, but I had to deal with chronic back pain. And I was in my probably early 50s, right in the kind of the prime of my ministry there, my last pastorate. And I would get down where I could hardly walk. I would have to crawl sometimes just to get around the house. My back was so bad. And I would talk to some of my men, and they had these steps to go up to the platform. And I would have to have, on some occasions, some men to help me climb the steps. Here I am, the prime of my life. And it dawned on me, if I don't make some changes, my ministry, my effectiveness, my ability to make a difference and provide for my family is being sabotaged because of this chronic back pain. And I began to make intentional votes by the way that I conducted myself, exercising, strengthening my core. And it's a part of my everyday. I've always been sort of athletic, but to be regimented in my exercise habit, I do now. I walk because I walk toward my desires. I watch what I eat because I am eating toward my desires. I have 6 virtually perfect grandchildren, and now I've got to live longer. But when I did have 5, and about a year ago, God sent us Ruby Carolyn. But I remember when my grandchildren started being born, it rocked my world. And I'd hold these little babies, and I remember holding them and thinking, I want to live to see them grow up. I get emotional thinking about it here. I want to see them grow up. And it's my desire to be at their wedding. I don't have to do their wedding, but I want to be at their wedding. And then I want to hold their first child, hold my great-grandchildren. But to do that, I have to vote with how I exercise, with how I eat. And so the point of all this is that everything you do is a vote for the kind of person you're going to be, the kind of influence you're going to have, the kind of future you're going to have. And so I want you to vote for desire. Get a hold of your desire. Don't compromise with busy work and piddly stuff and even good stuff, but it's not focused on your desire. I want you to vote for desire. Now here's the punchline. I remember a number of years ago, Sanj and I went to this conference in Columbia, South Carolina. I remember this so distinctly. It was at the Embassy Suites in Columbia, South Carolina. And of course, obviously being from South Carolina, Columbia was our state capital, and we had a lot of events and stuff there. And so I stayed at that embassy suite on numerous occasions, and I know the room, I know the moment, I know the place. And I remember the lady that was speaking that day. She was talking about it had to do with counseling. We were starting an outreach ministry in our church for the community, and so we wanted to get some training on how to minister to the special needs of people. And so she was giving some examples of just some disastrous lives and what to do. And then she said this statement. She said, You've heard this. You've heard people say, well, it's never too late to have a happy childhood. Well, she said this. She said, contrary to what people say, there does come a time when it's too late to have a happy childhood. And she had given us several examples, and that has stayed with me. I've never forgotten that. And you know, that is so true. There will come a time when it'll be too late, like that father realized it'll be too late. My son's going to say goodbye, and he'll visit on Christmas and call me on Father's Day, but he will no longer live in my house. There'll come a day, a pastor realized there's going to come a day when it will be too late to save for retirement. There will come a day when I won't have an opportunity to have a shot at growing my church. There will come a day when till death do we parts us. That vow we made, we make that for a reason. All these important things in our life that our deepest desires are grounded on. If by chance someone that sees this that maybe is not a person of faith, or you haven't surrendered your life to Jesus Christ, there does come a day when it's too late to do that. That's why the Bible says today is the day of salvation. So there comes a day, there comes a time that your deepest desires, no matter how deep they are, no matter how important they are, it is too late. And so that leads me to what I'm going to ask you to do today in voting for desire. Remember the mission. The goal of this lesson is to convince you to take seriously the question, just like last week, what do I really and truly desire? And truthfully answer it. Take the time. What do I truthfully? Look at yourself. Look deep into yourself. Quit playing the games. Be honest. It may seem selfish, or it may seem outrageous, or you may be embarrassed. It may be something you would be embarrassed to share. You got to look at your heart. And what do you really and truly desire? And honestly answer that. And then earnestly begin doing things that are required for you to reach your desires. Earnestly begin voting every day to make your desires come true. That's what I want you to do. So how does that work? How does that look? First of all, as I said, honestly admit your desire. Honestly. I remember on one occasion, a young minister came up to me and he asked me, he says, what do I have to do to get elected to the youth board? And I remember thinking the first thing that came to my mind is the first thing to do is not to ask people questions like that. Because the moment I think there's something in all of us, we kind of push away from overtly ambitious people sometime. But remember what I said last week, in that it is one of my values, and I was kind of gratified that he could be open and vulnerable with me and ask, and really his real desire. I want to be on the youth board. What do I have to do? And remember what I told you. It may be selfish. It may even be slightly sinful. It may be egotistical. Your motives may not be. Your motives will never be completely pure till you get on the other side. But if a man, even if the desires are off base, if he's got some desire, then we can work with that. It's the man or the woman that is just going with the flow, that has no desire, no ambition. It's hard to help people like that. And so I took the young man aside and I walked him through some things that he could do that would increase his chances of one day being elected on the youth board. I hope he gets elected. because we need guys that want to be on there, that will be proud of it and take it serious. And so anyway, I just this week, here's another example. I had a pastor, I was talking, what do you really desire? It took a little while, and embarrassingly, he admitted that he wanted a church to run a certain number. Hey, don't apologize. We're not just going after the number for the number's sake. And so you have to examine your heart. But a guy that has no desire, like my son-in-law is an avid racer, and he's good at it. And so when I'm riding with him, I was riding with him the other day, and he's talking about the tachometer, and it goes up to a certain place, and the speedometer. He wants a car that shows you at least 160 miles an hour on the speedometer. He's got all these numbers that he's going by. It's not about the number, but it's what those numbers represent. He won't say an engine that's got some firepower. And this pastor wanted a church that has some influence, that was reaching the lost, making an impact in his community. Don't be embarrassed. Admit it. Admit it. And let God refine it. And who knows what you can do. And so, honestly, admit your desires. I'm convinced that most people, they're so modest that they won't even admit to themselves what they really desire. They have been so beaten down. When they've gone and asked people, what do I need to do to be elected to the youth board? They've been ridiculed. I remember this, I didn't have this in my notes. I remember the first time I broke my tithe record as a rookie pastor. And I was so excited. I went and expressed it to an older man that I respected, and he shot me down. And that's when I realized that I have to be careful who I share my desires with. And so we've been so beaten down. We've been taught to be so modest. Remember the crab bucket, staying in the crab bucket. But I want you to honestly admit your desires. And then just two things. The second is declare your desires as clearly and succinctly before God every day. I state my desires, my short list, my deepest desires. I state them every day before God and earth and even under the earth. He's given him a name that's above every name, that at the name of Jesus every knee should bow, and those in heaven and on earth and under the earth. And I just put the universe on notice, and the spiritual universe on notice. This is what I desire. And unless God refines it or amends it or replaces it, I'm going for it. I am running to win, metaphorically. I don't do a lot of running, I do a lot of walking. And so I want you to honestly admit your desires, and then clearly and succinctly state them before God every day. You know, just listening to yourself talk sometime will get you in check. When you just listen to what you're saying, okay, wow, that sounds selfish. That sounds off. No, that's not what I'm really about. And then you begin to go back and amend it yourself. Or when you say it before God, it's amazing what God will say back. And he'll look at you and say, son, daughter, I appreciate your ambition. I appreciate the fact, like James and John, that you want to have high-ranking positions in my cabinet. I appreciate that, but let me talk to you. I've got something else for you. But the very act of honestly identifying your desires and then honestly and succinctly, publicly declaring them every day, where you hear them, where God hears them, that process alone will be a start to help you to identify. And then you spend the rest of the day, decision after decision, voting for your desire. Let me conclude it this way. One of my greatest fears, I don't know how I came up with this, but I've just been this way since I was a young man. One of my greatest fears is to one day stand before God and feel pretty good about myself. Man, I've done pretty good. And the Lord tallies everything up. And he said, David, Yeah, you did pretty good at being a 6, maybe a 7, maybe a 5, maybe a 4 talent man. Nothing wrong with being even a 1 talent man. Nothing wrong with that if that's what God's entrusted you with. Nothing wrong with any of those. But discovering that if I had had the courage, if I had had the fortitude, if I'd have had the desire, if I'd have pressed, I could have been a 10-talent man. I may not be a 10-talent man, but when I come to my grave, I want to know it. I don't want any surprises on the other side. And I think you're the same way. 1 Samuel 9, 1 and 2, as we close this out today, it illustrates one more vital key that I want you to remember. 1 Samuel 9, 1 and 2 says, and there was a man of Benjamin whose name was Kish, a mighty man of influence. And then the second verse says, and he had a son. That son was Saul. I want to remind you, Saul, just like in my own life, I had such an advantage. I had a dad that was in the ministry, had a good name. And he started as a coal miner's son. I started as a well-respected minister's son in the ministry. And when you succeed, you're not succeeding just for others, but ultimately your desires you're not succeeding just for yourself, but ultimately your desires are going to affect others. God wired you in a certain way because others are counting on you. Their destiny. Kish had a son named Saul. Saul became king because he had a dad that was a powerful, influential, and wealthy man, and that gave him such an advantage. Brothers, sisters, there's a lot more involved in your desires. People are counting on you, your family, your community, the world. It's going to take a man and a woman with a deep desire that fuels passion to get up and do what ordinary people won't do if extraordinary things are going to happen. That's why, now I want to read it. I want you to go back one more time and plumb the depths of your heart and clarify your deepest and most worthy desires and vote for them every day in what you say and in what you do. God bless you. Let's keep running to win for the sake of Christ and those that are counting on us.